people can still come in.
Yeah, they still come in.
All
right, so Kaspar, the floor is yours. You don't need any introduction because people saw you already posting stuff.
I tried to share indeed. Guys, I want to say a very warm welcome. We have a rather exclusive group, so I want to make sure this is time well spent for all of you. I'm very much appreciative of the fact that you're here with me, rather than waiting for the free drinks. That's all I was talking about. Really rather briefly, even though we have a lot of time, I do not want to spend too much time talking about myself because I figured all speakers talk a lot about themselves and I don't think this is really interesting to you guys. So the only thing you need to kind of know is where my experience is coming from, and that's actually working for Google Search. So speaking from the horse's mouth, I can actually address questions from actually working from the inside out if you want. And if you like what I'm talking about, you can connect via LinkedIn. Kaspar.link is actually redirected. But let's skip that part for the time being. I thought that title would actually carry because it scares people. Because nobody wants to experience an SEO horror story. Come on in guys, don't be shy. It's going to be very well worth your time. But what this really is 3 case studies. And I want to say straight away, I will not embarrass anyone because, it's a small world, everybody knows everyone. So it's not my objective to point out to an actual company saying they kind of messed up big time. So I changed the domains, I hope you don't mind, and I pride myself on being extremely creative with domains, which you'll see in a moment. But the data is real. This is what really is important to understand that these things actually did happen. And of course, it provides us with an opportunity to learn. Something you may not know, I grew up in southern Germany. There is nobody more cost-effective, cost-efficient than we are. We are cheap. And I think the cheapest way of learning and avoiding one's own mistakes is to learn from other people's mistakes. So, one thing, and I have that slide for tomorrow's session, which is a completely different topic. I think this is an important slide just to make it, to make sure that we have the mindset right. And I want to say it once and never talk about that again today, which is signals. SEO is all about signals. It's input, output, all right? So the rankings, what we all crave, what we want, where we want to succeed, is the output. It's the result of the signal input. And Google has no bias. They don't care whether your website ranks or not. They just read signals. Sometimes they read the signals in the way we want them to read it. Sometimes that's actually not happening. So I have only 3 boring slides, and this is the first boring slide. I start off on a boring slide, build up expectation. As I mentioned, I like coming up with funny domain names, not to embarrass people, so that's premiumretailwebsite.com. You don't need to look at the actual figures. What really is interesting here, and I hope you don't mind me showing this. Do I have a pointer? I have a pointer. Cool. So this is the visibility. This is the organic search visibility of a website, right? And as you can see, they're doing kind of like right for their vertical, and then something happens. That's those colorful blobs, and then there's fluctuations, and there's more things happening, and progressively things start to go really downhill. So, premiumretailwebsite.com, and they're in the business of selling jewelry and watches, kind of bling bling and expensive watches. And generally speaking, these guys, there we go. Now I jumped a couple slides. These guys were doing really rather good, and I want to say they are not just an online business, but also a physical business with physical shops all around Europe. So business was all right, things were going the right direction. Also in the online world, they were, however, bothered a little bit by their lengthy domain. So the actual domain they were using was actually really lengthy as well. So they came up with the idea, which is an everyday occurrence, to procure another domain and to conduct a migration. I'm not going to ask in the room if anybody ever conducted a migration, but if you have done it, you know what it means. There is stuff happening, there's fluctuations whenever there is a migration anyway. These guys obviously needed to have the website re-crawled, so, in an ideal world that would already be problematic, but they didn't conduct an audit in advance. meaning they didn't check how is the website signals, referring to the previous slide, to the signal slide. They didn't check how the signals are being read by search engines, including bot, and of course, Google bot, and of course Bing bot. Those are two major search engines we're talking about. So they took all the legacy, everything that was built over the years. They basically threw it from domain A that they used to utilize to domain B and crudely redirected, crudely 301 redirected. Every single pattern, with no regard whatsoever whether the content was still there or not. You can get away with legacy signals frequently because, you know, the website has other websites signals that they can countermeasure kind of negative signals. But then you move to a new domain. For Google, this is a new website. It's redirected, but for Google, this is a new website. So everything kind of starts from scratch. And of course, having landing pages with no content whatsoever is very much not in favor. From a technical point of view, their signals became progressively worse. And up until this point, I want to say this is very, very common. And not only talking about prospective clients that address us, you know, trying to get some help, but this is a very common way for people, even successful large companies, to conduct migration. Basically, do it and see what happens. Not ideal. I do not recommend going down that path, but that's what a lot of people do. Here is something that happened that I've only seen once happen, but that was the original inspiration for this presentation and the topic. They received a letter from another company which had the trademark on their new domain. And at that very point in time, they panicked. Because obviously this is a problematic situation when you're suddenly operating your main brand, your main website on a term that is a branded term of another company without having their consent. They panicked big time. They decided, let's move away, let's hand over that new domain, let's move away as soon as possible. They didn't want to revert back to the old domain. So they actually checked the aftermarket where when you can purchase utilized domains, old domains with the past. And they purchased another domain and conducted yet another migration. Obviously not what did happen whatsoever. Now, obviously this had to be re-crawled again. At that point, having two migrations in a short succession, that's something to be avoided. That's very sub-ideal. They did not do their due diligence while purchasing a domain that had a past, an aftermarket domain. That domain had a lingering penalty. I'm somehow a little bit of an expert on Google penalties for that reason, because I did apply Google penalties for many years. But I was also on the team that was removing those penalties within Google search. So let me tell you, those penalties tend to linger for a long, long, long time. They expire eventually, so they will go away eventually. But when you're purchasing a domain, preferably you want to have some sort of security that it's not in place, or at least have it removed shortly thereafter, because that's obviously problematic if it's your main domain. So things were getting from really bad to worse, because at that point the rankings were in tailspin. The company was not happy at all. The management was not happy at all. They were grappling. They were trying to find a way to mitigate the situation. They came up with a really rather unorthodox idea to decentralize SEO operations, meaning that the UK sales team would take care of the UK side of online sales on their own directory. The Germans would do their own thing, and the French would do their own thing, and so far and so forth. So everybody was essentially, everybody had their own hegemony over a small part of the website, but there was no real consensus, may I say it that way. So initially there was a lot of strife. Those teams didn't really click with each other to begin with, and initially there was a lot of passion behind the communication, but eventually there was no communication. So basically everybody decided, we don't care what the other guys do, we're going to do our own thing, which resulted in a technology that resembled very much this slide. So the CMS that was utilized, one team uses one, the other team uses another. One is proprietary, the other one is a WordPress team, whatever. And of course that touchpoint was very inconsistent. At that point, technical signals were problematic, and that was the result. The result was really a dead end, where a website that was really rather, I want to say successful, rather visible for the relative terms, ended up losing their search visibility for no good reason, because of a lot of decisions that were made, decisions that were intentionally made, but uneducated decisions. A couple of things. I pride myself to want to give my audience something that they can implement within their own operations. I'm a big fan of democracy, but SEO is not about democracy. SEO has to be decentralized. I like to compare SEO to operating a Formula One team. In a Formula One team, you have 2 drivers, you have a large group of technicians, you have the physicians, you have the strategists. It's 100 or 200 people, but you have one team principle, and this is most important. There must be one person who mitigates the communication internally, but who ultimately has the decision-making power to make things happen. Otherwise, it's going to be inconsistent. This is very, very important. And the other thing is audit regularly. And the guy who provides this kind of services telling you to audit regularly, yes, there is a self-serving intention in this. But if you think about it for a moment, our website, our commercial websites are vehicles to generate revenue. Very much in the same way like the vehicle, hopefully a German brand, myself German, so hopefully you're driving a German brand, but no matter which brand car you're driving, you would bring it at least once per year for a checkup, wouldn't you? To check the fluids, the brakes, the lights, whatever else it is, the air conditioning unit. I do it every time we go on a longer trip because I do not want to get stuck in the middle of the highway with the kids screaming, "Are we there yet?" So your website is a vehicle in a similar way, right? It's generating revenue. You don't want the website to get stuck because of legacy signals, because of legacy technology, because of architecture, infrastructure that used to work really rather well, but which is dated at that point in time, so check it on a regular basis. I always think for commercial websites, 12 months is an ideal cycle. You can plan very well in advance and make sure it's a holistic SEO audit. On-page signals, content, technical, but also off-page signals. Everything together because they go hand in hand. And now it's not working. Is it? Now it's working. All right. Let's take a peek at the second example because it's kind of similar but very different in regards to what had happened. Please don't be shy. Have a seat. Take your space. JourneyCompareHeaven.com. Again, the total numbers of no consequence, but this is a super exciting example for those among you that have a rather large website. The green bar, that's the volume of landing pages of the website that are desirable landing pages. By that I mean those landing pages that you want to have crawled, indexed, and recrawled on a regular basis, and also visible in Google search. So those cash cows that we want to rank. The gray bar, that's the volume of landing pages in total, and these are not, they're obviously partly overlapping, but they're not the same. If you can't think about it right now, think about the investor relation pages and the blog and the legacy forum. Those landing pages, they may generate traffic, but they rarely generate traffic that's converted. That's not your cash cows. So what happened to JourneyCompareHeaven.com? This is an example from before pandemic times. It was a beautiful time to be in the travel business. And these guys, they had a straightforward proposition. They did well, and their idea of, moving forward with the business is to increase sales. It doesn't get more straightforward than that. What they didn't have was like a sparkling, brilliant idea, how are we going to stand out? So they decided we have to website in one language. And it's about 100 million landing pages, altogether with all offers. How about we introduce new markets by translating, ideally they would have, of course, rather than translated, they would have localized it, which is not the same thing. But their idea was, let's translate the website in other European languages and cover those markets. There's opportunity in that. This is a legitimate way to go about business to expand. So they did just that. They had the content translated to another 5 languages. So we're talking factor 5 in terms of increasing the volume of landing pages. That's quite a lot, but it's quite manageable. And just a word of caution. There is a difference between localizing and translating. Translating is making sure that the words are the same in a different language. Localizing is actually giving the flavor so that the Polish target audience feels that they are being addressed in their native tongue. The Germans feel in the same way. It's not just making sure that the terminology is right. A very common mistake is where do you put the euro or the dollar or the zloty sign? Because in different languages you do that differently. It's fine nuances. They didn't do that, but it wouldn't have broken their back. What was really rather more on their mind was crawl budget. Because crawl budget is the volume of crawling that Google attributes to a particular landing page. They don't just keep crawling and crawling and crawling. They have to be frugal at some point as well. So going from 100 million landing pages to 600 million landing pages, that's an increase. But if your server can handle, that's perfectly fine. You can do it. Obviously, cautiously is better. But if you're really fast, if you're running your operation on Google Cloud or AWS, those are 2 very good services, you will be able to manage most of the time. These guys did, however, do something on top of that. They were under the impression that having more landing pages translates to more relevant traffic. And they did open all the filtering for indexation. So every variation of every offer, every landing page that was available on their website became a significant individual landing page. So now, out of blue, we didn't have the same landing page for find a hotel in Warsaw in 6 languages. No, we had a variation of that for every single date you can think of. So out of blue, we didn't have 6 landing pages, but maybe 6,000 or way above that. All of which were now competing against each other. So now, we did have a tsunami. We now had that incredible volume of landing pages that had to be recrawled. Crawled in the first place, then recrawled in order for them to perform. They would have still gotten away with that. Amazingly, it's possible. If you utilize the canonical element. With the canonical element, you can tell Google, I have 1,000 landing pages, or more, or less, doesn't matter. More than 1. I have more than 1 landing page, they are pretty much the same. I don't care for this particular one. The rest you can forget about it. You can simply just forget about it. They didn't have canonical elements in place, and that was, of course, the beginning of real trouble. Because now cannibalization became a huge issue. We have to keep in mind, we are in the travel business. Travel business is hugely competitive. Was before the pandemic, is still today. You're already competing for a multitude of really large with really large brands for the same term. Now, you're not just competing against those websites, you're also competing against, within your own website, the landing pages start competing against each other. The signals are not magnified for one landing page to make it stronger. No, they are spread out among the multitude of landing pages. And that's, of course, terrible. What was much worse for these guys was the fact that they had linked content pages. How did that come about? They didn't have the crawl budget for those billions of landing pages that were in existence. They were crawled infrequently in an industry where an offer is short-lived. By the time a user was finding a landing page for the Find Hotel in Warsaw, they were clicking on the offer, on the special offer that was ranking in SERPs, ending up on the landing page which was already expired at that point in time because it wasn't crawled frequently enough. Obviously, that was terrible because user experience. The next thing the users did was to go back to Google search, to refine the query or look for another result. Google measures all of that, right? For those of you that read the Google documents that leaked, you may have noticed that user signals is a thing. This is the kind of user signals that make a difference. This is a high priority signal. Because these were terrible, because users kept in a growing capacity going to the landing page and then reverting back and looking for another result, they indicated with their behavior they didn't find what they were looking for, progressively dropping the user signal as far as Google was concerned further and further. And on top of that, these guys did not save and preserve server logs. We do have a lot of time today. We don't have enough time for me to talk about one of my pet topics, which is saving and preserving server logs. Suffices to say, if you are not saving your server logs today, please consider starting doing it now, because only with saving server logs you can actually tell over time how your servers react to Google inquiries. All right? These guys did not do that. They were really rather savvy in technical terms, which was good for these guys, because while it was a long road ahead of them, all of these issues and all of these self-inflicted wounds, those mistakes made, they could be reverted. And ultimately, these guys succeeded. It was a happy story after all, even though, of course, they did lose some traffic in the process. Takeaways. I spoiled one already. Save and preserve your server logs. If you happen to work in a large organization where you are not the CEO yet, you might have two groups of people or two people telling you it's not possible. Any Germans among us? Not a single one, so I can correct jokes on Germans' expenses? Excellent. Yeah. I work a lot with German companies. So within German companies, the first group of people that throw stones our way is the legal team of all teams. They say it's not allowed to save and preserve your server logs, which is not accurate. We only care for bot logs, Googlebot, Bingbot primarily, not for user server logs. So you can anonymize all of user server logs. We don't care for that. We only want to know how does our server respond if Googlebot or Bingbot request landing pages, and which ones do they request? And if you can't really think right now of a way to utilize it, just think of three circles, right? Three round circles that ideally overlap. You have your sitemap, one circle. You have a second circle which represents desirable landing pages. Now these should be overlapping with your sitemaps one-on-one, ideally, or almost one-on-one. They rarely do. But then you have a third circle with the actual landing pages that Google crawls, indexes, and ranks. If they have a high level of overlap, phenomenal, excellent. If they don't, obviously there is a lot of potential to improve. If you don't have server logs, you can't tell. Start saving and preserving server logs. The second team, by the way, who will tell you it's not possible is your IT team, because obviously it's an additional work for them. So the argument they bring to the table is it's too expensive. And then you show them how much a hard drive costs, and then you see it's not too expensive. How much is a hard drive nowadays? 1 terabyte drive? I don't know. 400 euro? Something like that? Less? Probably less, right? If you buy them in bulk, it's much less. It's not even a business expense, it's nothing. So you go ahead and save and preserve those TXT files, and then you gzip them. You can get a lot on 1 terabyte, okay? And one point, this is really food for thought. If you don't want to use your server logs for your SEO, that's perfectly fine. But you can utilize it as a bargaining chip if you're ever in a situation where you're selling your company. This can be a very good part of an exit strategy where you throw on top of the conversation, oh, by the way, we have the server logs of the last 10 years. So how much can that cost the price? Food for thought. And more of a website, having a larger website is not the ultimate bliss, all right? Typically, having more focused websites or landing pages, or rather fewer landing pages, but that are qualitatively better, is a better, more successful SEO strategy in comparison to the alternative. Having more landing pages will not get you ahead of the competition. And this is the third example. And again, the third boring slide. Now the boring slides are through. This is the volume of that website's PageRank passing backlinks. So essentially, other websites pointing links their way. As you can see, it goes up and to the right to some point, and then it goes really, really up and to the right. And this is a company that still is in the medical vertical, medicinemakeshappy.com. These guys operated a very compact operation. There's a lot of stuff being outsourced. And these guys provide a portal, they operate a portal that provides medical services, plastic surgery, but also finding the right physician. It's actually the place, it's a main brand where people would go to. These guys did really rather well, and they had a similar idea as in the previous example. They had a substantial market share. They really wanted to have a bigger market share. I can totally relate to that. This is understandable. This is a good plan. How to get there? They knew how to go about it, and the way they were going about being successful included also link building. They were not doing it themselves. They had an agency working on their behalf. The cooperation was a heavy one, and they knew full well that this is a binary situation. I always like to refer to this slide as the scene in the original Matrix, where there is like two pills. You can take one or the other. Not a lot of movie goers here, I can see. So it's a binary decision. You can't have a half measure. You essentially build links along Google Webmaster Guidelines / Google Search Essentials. It has been rebranded, doing it the way Google wants you to. Or you do it outside. You do it for PageRank passing purposes, and that is a clear-cut violation. They already did have a considerable legacy in terms of existing backlinks, because this third party, the agency that was working on their behalf, doing all their off-page optimization, it continued building links for a really long time. So there was a legacy that they already lived with. They were, however, under the impression, or rather they believed in a couple of industry myths. One industry myth that they were confronted with at some point was about domain rank and trust rank and all these things. So really, really quickly, I don't think I need to explain PageRank, right? Or do I? Should I explain PageRank? No. So everybody knows what PageRank is, and everybody knows this is a value that Google utilizes, right? About, I think, when was that? I think it was roughly 16 or 18 years ago. So around that time, let's take 15 years, just for the sake of a conversation. About 15 years ago, PageRank was visible on a website level for 14 days. And never since, okay? It's a value that Google calculates on a page level on a daily basis and never shares publicly. It doesn't share it with the public, with the industry public. It doesn't share it with the website operator. It's an internal value. Short of having senior edge access at Google, you will never know what the page rank of a given website or a document is. Still, there is this monster of a page rank backlink building industry around, that has been around for 20 years. And because they can't reutilize PageRank so much because it's a proprietary value and they didn't know it, they utilize terms as domain rank, trust rank, and fantasy rank, you name it, fairy tale rank. Unfortunately, Google doesn't care for any of those. This is marketing vehicles that third parties use to promote their business, but this is not a value that Google cares for. So these guys were building essentially domain rank, trust rank, page rank links without really knowing is there any value behind it, but they were still building those. They did know that building links for page rank purposes is a two-edged sword, meaning it can work very well, it can lead to growing visibility. It is also something that can come to haunt you because Google considers it a violation, as mentioned previously. These guys were thinking, we're doing well, we do have a budget, let's increase the link building budget and see what happens. And they saw a correlation, right? So they increased the budget, knowing full well they were kindling with fire a bit more, but there was a correlation. The website was growing in visibility, and these guys were happy, so they went further and increased the budget a little bit further, knowing full well the risks were growing yet again. And ultimately they decided, you know what, let's just just make real money. And so they built, or they had a lot of links built. And of course, that did translate to, the fallout that you can imagine. Building links to past page rank is, as far as Google is concerned, a black hat technique. There is still ambiguity. They're not going to come and tell you, did you guys build those links? You can totally tell if somebody's building links that past page rank for a multitude of reasons. Most of all, nobody builds links in a way that they would pop up naturally because they use commercially viable anchor texts, which are very dominant in the overall anchor text overview. So if your top 10 is buy cheap insurance here, get your personal private insurance right here, this is not a natural distribution, and whatever your anchor is, I know about here, but I'm just making an example. So obviously this was problematic. These guys were caught with the hand in the cookie jar. That's the infamous Google penalty. Google uses a different term for that. They use the term manual spam action. I used to do that as well when I was spearheading Google Webmaster Outreach. No, penalty is more accurate, I suppose. And that's the moment where you do receive a Google message in Google Search Console saying, at that point in time it's already too late. It's in a production system, so with a little bit of a delay, the website operator, that is the verified owner of the web platform, receives a message saying, you do have a penalty because of violation X. It's really rather specific. Typically, it's in your own language or in the website's language. These guys at the same time did not have any record of the link building that was conducted over years. I know you guys do not do link building. This is a safe space. We can talk about it if you want to. But I will say one thing. If I were having someone build links on my behalf, I would ask them to provide a complete record of all the links built, and to maybe amend the contract that they would remove those links on request. They're probably not going to go for the latter part because it's borderline impossible. But if you at least have a complete record of all the built links over time, you have an ace up your sleeve. You have something that you can utilize if you need to. So, these guys, at that point, obviously the conversation with the agency was getting pretty sour. They didn't like the results, and the agency was like, hey, well, you asked us to do exactly that, so what you complaining about? They had to apply for reconsideration. There is a process in place on Google's side for websites that want to get back to Google's good grace. It includes removing whatever the reason is for the penalty. So if it's been link building, as in this case, you have to submit a disavow file disassociating the website from the links built. This is a list, essentially a list of links. Using a domain operator, it's something that has to be built. That's exactly the reason why you need the record. If you have the record, you can build that really rather swiftly. But if you don't, you have to crawl those links, it takes more time. And you have to apply for reconsideration, meaning sending a message via Google Search Console to Google saying, this is what we have done, please please remove the penalty, please leave the penalty. I have processed hundreds of thousands of those reconsideration requests. Please do yourself a favor, if you ever have to submit a reconsideration request, make it as short as possible. Starting off with, hi, my name is John. Last week, Friday the 13th, we got a message saying that we've been penalized. This is outrageous. I have an uncle who is a lawyer, a three-legged dog, and a dozen children. I'm going to have to fire one of those if you don't get me back into Google. You're laughing. This is almost verbatim, but people would write. You want to empathize. But the Google guys, still working on that team, they have very limited time to actually process those reconsideration requests, right? So you need to give them just the amount of information for making their job easier. There's no need to telling them that the website received a penalty because they can see that. You couldn't apply for a reconsideration request otherwise to begin with. There is no point in saying we didn't do it. There is no point in saying I'm going to have to let employees go if there is no traffic forthcoming, because that's not going to make a stronger case. Typically, it's best to say, hi, this is what we have done. And the cherry on top of the icing is to say, we want to abide by Google Webmaster Guidelines going forward. This is something that can push you a little bit towards the right direction and preferably abide by Google Webmaster Guidelines for a while at least. So this is what these guys did. They did have one thing that worked really, really well. Because I have to say one thing. The reconsideration request, there is no confirmed turnaround time, right? Those penalties, they can linger for years if unattended. It can be reapplied after expiration date if the violation is still in place. So waiting is not really an option here, right? What really works well in terms of getting a penalty off a website is having a unique selling proposition. Bringing something to the table that is not readily available elsewhere. Having a brand, having a real website, having real contact information, showing that the website has value. And these guys did have that, and they were successful eventually. So this is a dangerous slide for me. Ex-Google guys have built traffic links. So most of the time people say, ex-Google guy said build links, yes, for traffic. There's a difference for building links for PageRank, because that's the old way to do it, right? So we build links that pass PageRank, so Google notices. We accumulate more PageRank, effectively making our website more visible in Google search results eventually, so there is more traffic forthcoming. And the alternative to that is building links just for the traffic purposes. It's most of the time it's actually branding links. These are no followed, so Google doesn't frown upon them. They tend to be really rather expensive, but they generate traffic right then and there. The return of investment is almost instantaneous. Happy to share a blueprint on that. Ping me on LinkedIn, or I can share it later if you want to do a conversation. It's a safer alternative. Whether to build links for traffic or PageRank, this is a business decision. It essentially is a risk management decision, something that one has to evaluate for themselves. I want to say one thing, and this is really, really important. Every penalty can be lifted. Every time a website fails to live up to expectation, when it's really not where you want it to be, it can be undone. No situation is as grave as giving up, throwing things into the wind and saying, okay, we're done. We cannot work with this domain anymore. Sometimes it takes a little bit of time, but an awful lot of time, it's worth it. And last but not least, and I find that slide most important because it's not just optimistic, it's true. In my experience, many organizations are averse to change, particularly large organizations. Wherever there is the thinking in terms of quarterly thinking, where you have to provide results on a quarterly basis, management is really rather hesitant to introduce changes that can generate benefits in 2 or 3 quarters. But in terms of SEO, that's quite possible, depending on the size of your website, depending on your overall budget. There is no guarantee it's going to happen within the next months or 3 months, right? So telling the top management, you have to change things now so you can benefit from it next time there is the high season for you guys, that's not an appealing prospect. They don't like that kind of change. They don't want to introduce it. That's the reason why large websites tend to have a lot of legacy signals. At that point in time where there is some serious issues with SEO, at that point in time where rankings tank completely, the panic spreads among the management team, especially around the chief financial officer, because they see what's happening and they know the impact it's going to have on the revenue down the line. So that's very often the moment when they say, okay, we don't care what you do, just do it. You want to essentially change everything, change all the signals, improve it? Fine. Just make a change trajectory. It can be the springboard for growth, not growth to the level enjoyed before. There is no glass ceiling. Google doesn't care how much traffic it gives, it sends our way. Traffic that has not been enjoyed previously, because at that point when the situation shit hits the fan and when everything has to be undone and all the signals have to be streamlined, this is often the opportunity to get rid of all the legacy signals and go above and beyond, far above what has been enjoyed previously. I hope you can enjoy that thought. These are the 3 cases in the short URL. It's going to redirect. Happy for you guys to have a look and to described it in painful detail on Search Engine Land, one of my favorite publications on Search Engine Land. I will, of course, share it on LinkedIn. Maybe not later today. You guys are almost there for the free drinks, so you wouldn't have time for reading tonight. But maybe tomorrow, let's say not before breakfast, maybe a little bit later, when you're all a bit more rested. Sorry? I want you to, no, I'm happy with you guys drinking. There's no problem with that. I want you to remember. At least remember where to go if you need help with SEO. But also, I'm really hoping to seeing some of your beautiful faces tomorrow morning. I will be talking about something completely different, very different presentation. It's essentially how to rank an affiliate website. And this is my all-time favorite slide, which I'm happy to keep here in place, but I also do have backup questions in case you guys are shy. Are you guys a shy bunch? Does anybody have any questions? Does anybody wants to talk about a friend's website?
I have a question.
Thomas.
So you said about server logs.
Yes.
So what's inside the server logs and why are they valuable? What's the value?
Is it cool if I come down?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, do I need to stay in front of the camera? I should stay in front. Cool. Okay. Thanks for asking the icebreaker. So server logs, every time a bot or even a user, it doesn't matter, every time they request a landing page, say example.com/index.html, there's a record being generated, right? And that record says the time, the response of our server, so ideally the response is 200 OK. But if the response is anywhere like 5xx or 404 or 301, that's obviously a completely different ball game because that's not the ideal desirable response of a server document for existing landing page. That's just 2 points. And of course, is that website actually resolving? So it can be a 200 landing page that represents 200, okay, but is there actual content behind it, right? So if you have all of that information, not for one landing page, but for the entire website and for a considerable period of time, I like to refer to half a year, preferably for as long as you can actually tell which is the landing pages that Google seems to favor. Do they favor the homepage? Probably yes, not in all cases, but the homepage tends to be really important. Now, do they favor the supplemental blog or the supplemental news section that you're operating? It's just supplemental content. You're not really in the blog business. You're not really in the news business. You are in the iGaming affiliate business, right? So if they favor those news and blog landing pages, you can actually tell that crawl budget is kind of wasted on that section of the website because we want them to focus on something else. So we have to shift priority. None of that can be said if those server logs are not being saved and preserved. This is just the pure SEO glasses, server logs, it's data. So you can use it in a beautiful way for leverage if you start a new company, but again, this is not my profession. From an SEO perspective, it's a treasure trove of data that allows you to tell what's the priorities of Google and how these can be managed in the future to come. Server log data not saved today can never be recovered. So we have to start saving and preserving server log data today so that we have the data that we can work on, say, 6 months in advance. Thanks for breaking the ice. I also can start asking you questions if you're cool with that. Ha! No, don't worry, I'm not mean. I used to go to school too. Do you guys want to go over the backup questions or do you guys want to go for the free drinks? Is this like an open bar all night?
Oh, yeah, it starts at 7:30 at a different venue.
But it's an open bar all night?
Yeah.
So,
For the all night, really? Or a couple of hours?
Until you pass out.
But there is no cap. It's not like no, because the important question right here is, do you guys have to run because there's a 10K cap on the bar and our colleagues already drank half of it?
No.
It's an open bar all night.
It starts when we get there. So.
We're cool.
So we can stay until.
Nobody's drinking
stay until
beer.
7 o'clock and we leave.
So we can still ask a couple of questions. I always say it's more cost effective for you guys to ask today or tomorrow. Subsequently, it's a consulting business that we're offering. It's a paid business. So if you want to be cost effective, take the opportunity today. It's free of charge. Do you guys want to have the backup question?
I have one question.
Sure, yes.
Actually, this is like 100% related with the topic, but then we will see.
Don't be shy.
Do you think that the black hat strategy in PPC can be efficient like long term, or is it problematic?
We offer more.
Yes. I'm using the opportunity that we don't have many people here. That's why I use the phone.
Yeah, but that's the reason why there's a live stream, right?
No, it's not a...
That's a backup.
Sure. The honest answer is yes. The honest answer is yes. And the reason for me saying is, to begin with, I think whether one embraces black hat techniques, what Google considers black hat or white hat, I think this is not an ethical decision, this is a business decision. It's a risk, because it can work really, really well. I mean, if you rank for play poker online for a week or a month, you're fine, right? It comes down to, are you comfortable with the risk for your main brand? That's for everybody to decide for themselves. What I have seen happen, and it kind of pains me to say that, what I see nowadays succeeding is methods that are pretty much from 2006, as in stuff that I've been showing you guys now, and it seems to be working. It almost is as if there is a renaissance of black hat techniques that can be utilized, exploited to the benefit of the website operator, which clearly are outside Google Webmaster Guidelines. So, do I see it happen? Yes. Then again, we only see a couple of hundred websites per year, so it's not the full picture. But it's definitely happening more, let's say, the last 12, 18 months. It's fascinating. This is not a frequent question, but I'm going to add it to my slide the next time around. More questions? I'm going to show you mine, okay? Is that cool? It's not working. Did I break it? No. There we go. Cool. So, how to avoid SEO disasters? To be honest, this is a frequent question, but I wouldn't fret about disaster. These were extreme cases. If you want to be on the safer side, don't put all your eggs in the same basket. Don't have an entire portfolio of websites and run it on black hat techniques and pray for the best, because obviously this is a recipe for disaster. Conduct audits if you want to have some websites operated on a more, more optimistic strategy, and some websites on a more conservative strategy. Obviously, you will be better placed to weather out the storm, because some websites that may be considered by Google black hat may be penalized eventually. But if they don't apply the same methods across board, you're not going to have your entire portfolio wiped out. And I also want to say, an SEO disaster is not the end of everything. It can still be undone. One thing that I would also like to point out in terms of SEO disasters, those 5% traffic that we can gain from Bing, this is not to be neglected. Because at that point in time, when we happen to lose all the traffic that's coming from Google, it doesn't have to be an SEO disaster. It can be the newest update, which doesn't work the way Google expected it. It's going to be rolled back eventually, but it hasn't been yet, so we lost the traffic. Those 5% that are forthcoming from Bing, then be grateful for that. So embrace Google traffic that's forthcoming, but also embrace Bing traffic. Do utilize Bing Webmaster Tools. Next to Google Search Console, this is the second tool that provides data that is verifiable in the way how a major website sees our website. In terms of signal consistency, this is great, so embrace both. Is a complete recovery even possible? Absolutely. I always think that it's actually the minimum objective, a complete recovery in terms of regaining the visibility previously enjoyed year over year. Of course, there's always fluctuations, that's normal. But regaining that level is absolutely possible, but it should be the minimum objective. The actual objective should be, of course, to go above and beyond. How to deal with legacy content? It depends on the type of legacy content. That's where audit comes in handy. What I very often see is supplemental content. So websites that do not have all that much publication going on because of their nature, they would often resort to either publishing news or blog, right? So if you look, for instance, for the best pizza in New York, it's not just the restaurants and not just people talking about pizza. You would have the insurance company and you would have the travel website, and they all talk about pizza. That's the dominant content. That's content that can come to haunt you, because eventually, if the percentage of that kind of content is too large, Google gets confused. It's your website now about travel, insurance, pizza. And you, of course, you do not want to rank for that freaking pizza in New York. You want to rank for cheap insurance or cheap travel or whatever your business is. So this is the kind of content that at some point need to be dealt with, potentially. Frequently, the best way, if there is no traffic forthcoming whatsoever, then just kill it. Server logs help, in terms of understanding is there any traffic forthcoming. You can also move it off blog. So whatever your brand name is, let's call it example.com for the lack of a better example, you move it from example.com to example.blog. And you cross-link those. You move those signals that are undesirable. You still keep your blog content, especially if your CEO wrote a couple of articles on that blog. You do not want to just kill it, because your CEO is a proud person. They really want to have those blog articles in place. So you just move it off the main website and thereby improve the signals of the main landing page or of the main web platform, and park that example to the blog, and it just lives there.
So you said that
Yes.
it's like a separate page, or it's like another page, like sub-page?
That will be part, because as long as the content remains under example.com, this is contributing factors, right? So you're going to have the blog and the news pages, potentially investor relations. Rarely, these are rarely really rather large, but FAQ pages or support subdomains, these tend to be often really sizable, right? So if these signals are too dominant in terms of content signals, it's sometimes, not in every case, but sometimes advisable to move these off domain. Not to a directory, not a subdomain, off domain. So you take preferably your brand name, and then you purchase a domain which is like .blog or whatever, .dev, whatever works best in that context. You can cross-link those, but you're moving the stuff that is undesirable to make your website leaner, but thereby more straightforward in terms of signals. And this is not a perfect recipe for every website. I also want to say that, because sometimes if the blog is an essential part of traffic generating content, you don't want to do that. It depends on the content, on the type of content, how fresh it is, how relevant it is.
So if I want to keep it on the domain, but not exactly in the domain, then I can do it on subdomain.
You can do it on subdomain. Word of advice, for blog, it's fine. If you ever want to be competing in the news business, as in having actual news on your website, press releases is not news, that's press releases. But if you really want to have editorial news and rank for news within Google News, make sure it's completely isolatable. So do not intersperse it into the blog. Preferably use whatever your domain is /news/ or news dot for directory. So Google can perfectly isolate it. They know this is the section that is news only, and then you stand a much better chance to be compliant with Google News guidelines, because a lot of people make the mistake of interspersing news with commercial intent, and then it's of course falling apart because Google doesn't want to rank that because it's competing for commercial queries with stuff that is supposed to be editorial. Does that answer your question? Cool, thank you. How to migrate without taking risk? You can't. Migration is a risk. I'm sorry. I mean, there was going to be fluctuations. You do it perfectly, as in perfectly. You prepare it for 6 months. You save and preserve your server logs for 2 years before that. You analyze everything. You have an audit done before. And then you move to a new domain, which is super awesome, and it's not being contested by another organization. There's still going to be fluctuations. It's normal, because it has to be recalled. But they're not going to be quite as violent. Is domain authority important? Yes, a German term. Jein, yes and no. Yes, it's important in a way that SEOs don't really think about it.
When you sell
So domain name is a thing, definitely, right? If you have a really cool short domain .com, .pm, .de, this is a really cool thing. I would not say this is completely off the table. From an SEO perspective, however, it's brand recognition. I often get the question, how comes when I look for something that, there's just Amazon landing pages and Wikipedia landing pages, Google seems to favor those. Kind of no, it's the users that favor those. Because when users look, including myself, when I look for a book that I want to have, I'm most likely to click on the book, even though it's available across board. You can buy it here in Poland in Epic, you can buy it at BOL. But I am so familiar and so used to Amazon. I know the return policy, I know they're going to deliver really quickly because of Amazon Prime. I'm most likely to click on Amazon because I know it, I know the brand. With my behavior, I indicate to Google, all right, the user likes that website, it seems to live up to their expectation. If I don't go back and refine the query or look for another result, I have indicated with my behavior my expectation was met. So domain is definitely, or brand building is definitely something to be taken seriously. It's part of a long-term SEO strategy, but it's not like, I'm going to buy myself a domain which I think has high authority and I'm going to rank just because of that. It's much more complex, I'm afraid. There's no simple answer to that question in a way, like, yeah, get yourself that perfect domain. And in a way, anyway, if you were to purchase a domain that has a past, you have no guarantee just because it's short and memorable and a real brand. You don't have a guarantee that it's going to be ranking in the way you want to, right? There is more than just one signal, and domain authority is not just a main important signal.
I mean, agencies to sell everybody.
No, that's not important. Yeah, it's a safe place. That's bullshit. That's really bullshit. You have to keep in mind, a big portion of the folks that work at Google Search, they are former SEOs themselves, so they know exactly how the market works. You can get a link from CNN and NBC and all of those large outlets, right? Mirror.com. You can get backlinks from Forbes, Focus, you name it. All of these big brands. Do you really think as Google doesn't know about that? Of course they do. Those websites keep selling links have been doing it for a really long time, and Google actually has a manual spam action, a penalty that says, we know you're selling links, you're not passing any page rank, by the way, because we know you're selling links. So these messages do pop up in Google Search Console of these websites. Do you think they tell their clients that they got the message? They keep selling links nonetheless because of the perceived domain authority. But obviously there is no authority being passed around. So from a pure link buying perspective, domain authority is non-existent because you can't gauge it unless you have Google Edge access, senior Edge access. Highly recommend it if you can get it. It takes a little bit of time. Are there any alternatives to Google Search Console data? I can't avoid that one. I think Bing Webmaster Tools is a priority. And there are paid tools that are really, really great in terms of not so much getting data from search engines, but rather crawling a website and auditing. You could do it within your own capacity, in-house, so to say. I'm a huge fan of Lumar. I guess something was Lumar. I'm not getting paid for saying that. Lumar, the Deep Crawl. So the tool is called Deep Crawl. It's a commercial tool. You have to pay for using it. And they rebranded it, and now it's called Lumar, be that as it may. This is awesome. And the competing tool is called Spotify, again, phenomenal. And ideally, you would take a couple of those. You can take Screaming Frog on top of that. You can take OnCrawl on top of that. Ideally, Write is a good one, the German tool. Ideally, you would take those and run them in sequence, not simultaneously. You don't want to break your servers down, right? So if you crawl your website time and time again with a number of tools, it's going to be a lot of stress on your servers. You don't want to do that while your customers are doing whatever you want them to be doing. But do it in sequence, try to compare the data. If it's consistent, great. If it's consistent and saying your website is bad, that's obviously not great, but at least you know it's verifiable data. If there is variation between the finding, because those are different tools, you have to dig further, you have to dig in the code. But these are great helpers when you want to start investigating how is my website signals. Highly recommend it. And that were all the questions. I'm afraid either you do want to talk about your SEO questions now, or you guys have to go to drink. I mean, it's one or the other. There is no alternative for you. Or you guys go have a couple of beers and come back. That might be an interesting conversation.
Will you join us for the drinks?
I'm completely abstinent, I'm afraid, so I won't be sharing more, but you know, I'm still willing to share if you want to.
We have non-alcoholic drinks.
You're a salesperson, I can see that. Anything? We can also talk later, if you want to, of course. I know some people prefer to have a more intimate setting. And I'll be very happy to see you guys tomorrow. Now Zoltan gave me the first slot, which in hindsight, given that there is an open bar tonight, this may have been an unwise choice.
9:45, so doesn't start early.
Open bar, 9:45. I don't know, mate. I don't know. Okay, I remember your faces. I'll check tomorrow.
Yeah, we will.
Cool. Thank you so much, guys. You've been very patient, very generous.